Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mental Health Toolbox podcast. I'm Patrick, your host, and I am ready to kick off episode 4. Coming off the holiday break, I trust everyone had a good time with family and friends and ready to get back to all things productive. All right, so in this episode, we'll be talking about how to identify your healthy thoughts, stepping it up from the previous discussion on how to identify and explore our unhealthy thoughts. So in this episode, we will be covering techniques for changing unhealthy thoughts to useful ones, how to increase helpful thoughts in general, how to identify our healthy thoughts, and then how to balance our thoughts with yes but statements. And lastly, learning to plan for a worry, or as I like to say, a problem-solving time during the week. But first, let's get to the intro.
Welcome to the Mental Health Toolbox podcast, where you will gain the knowledge to thrive. Here is your host, licensed psychotherapist, Patrick Martin.
Okay, welcome back to episode 4 of the Mental Health Toolbox podcast, and ready to kick off the new topic of identifying your healthy thoughts. Okay, so hopefully you'll notice this episode sounds a little bit better in terms of audio quality. Over the holiday, did pick up from my wife, aka Santa, a new interface for the audio setup here, the Scarlett Focusrite 2i2, and got a new and improved mic stand, so that should clean up the sound a bit, and I hope that you notice the improvement. I'm always trying to make this the most enjoyable experience it can be for you, my listeners. Okay, so let's get started. So learning to identify our healthy thoughts requires, much like exploring our unhealthy thoughts, some intention and purpose. So that means setting aside the time to explore our healthy thoughts and learning how to catch them and identify them, okay? So the first thing we can do to get into this mindset is to locate our healthy thoughts by using a kind of meditation, okay? So I would like you to bear with me here for a minute or humor me, I should say. Close your eyes and try to think about the last time that you were feeling really good, really happy. Okay, so just take a moment, and once you find yourself there, in that happy place, in that happy moment, whether that be at home or with other people or in your favorite sporting event or hobby, wherever it is, once you're there, I want you to ask yourself this question. What was or is the context? Meaning, where were you? Who were you with? And what were you doing? Okay? Remember that from English class? Who, what, when, where, how, right? Those are the things I want you to take into account. This is going to give us the stage, right? For the memory, for the feeling that we're trying to elicit. Now, the really important question, what were you thinking, right? It's easy to find these anchors in time through memories, past events, and kind of pull out the subjective context. Not so easy to think about our thinking, right? And this is where CBT gets a little tricky. But it's also the meat and potatoes. It's the stuff that allows us to make real progress. So, what were you thinking in that moment that you were happy? How are you interpreting your surroundings? Okay, think about that. All right, and now once you have that moment in time and you can identify what you were thinking about that, how are you feeling about the situation, it should be easier to kind of hone in onto the specific thoughts that were going on. And if you have trouble remembering exactly the situation, try and reimagine that situation happening now. What might you be thinking? How might you be interpreting the situation? And that's going to, vary largely depending on who you're with, right? Because we kind of think differently based on our company, right? So once you have that moment in time in mind and you're able to kind of drill down to what you were thinking or what your thought process was, I want you to try and write down the thought or the most likely thought that you would have in that scenario. Okay? Was it accurate, balanced, and complete, like we discussed before, the checks and balances, right? And how to filter out healthy thoughts. What feelings can you associate with that thought, right? If it's a happy thought, maybe you're feeling joy, gratitude. Those are feelings. And does this thought give you strength, courage, self-respect, and gratitude? And lastly, what type of thought can help you maintain a positive perspective? All right? So these are prompts you can use to kind of drill down on that thought and find out if this is a really helpful thought, right? A kind of nucleus for other healthy thoughts. Now, hopefully you were able to pull out of your hat a situation that allowed you to elicit those thoughts and then get in touch with those emotions, right? Those healthy emotions. But if you're like me, you'll find out it's pretty difficult to jump right into identifying healthy thoughts. We need context because that's where our thoughts live. Our thoughts and emotions live in our memories that are meaningful to us. And it's important to remember that our thoughts are precursors to our emotions, and thus their reactions to events. They are how we interpret the circumstances around us. It's how we make sense of the world. Thus, it's often easier to search out our emotions and correlated events than work backwards to try and explore any associated thought in that process. Okay, so this brings us on to the next skill we'll be discussing, and that is balancing our thoughts with yes, but statements. Okay, this is really important to keep us from gravitating toward the general and concrete ideas that seem more comfortable but aren't necessarily as accurate. Okay, so we've talked about this before. We've talked a lot about how to challenge our skewed assumptions and flip our negative thoughts. But what are we to do if our unpleasant thoughts are factual? In this instance, it's best to try and just observe. That's right. Almost as if you're a spectator, right? You can place yourself in a supportive role by pretending that your friend is the one experiencing the unfortunate event. Now, I don't know why this is, but even for me, it's always easier to try and comfort others than myself, right? And I'm a therapist. So, but the important thing is that I'm aware of this. So if I ever catch myself having trouble with self-compassion, or if I'm using critical self-talk, to stop and think, well, would I be talking like this to my kid if they came to me saying, oh, they felt like they were unable to do something and they were frustrated, or they were sad because of something that happened or something that somebody said. I wouldn't add to their negative thoughts. I would try and pull them out of them, right? Out of that mindset and give them perspective. And this is the same thing we have to do with ourselves. So try to think of encouraging things that you would say to your friend and what kind of support you could offer. Now, allow this to become your self-talk, right? So once you get in the flow of that mindset, then you can start to adopt it and turn it back inward toward yourself. Give yourself the same love and compassion that you would to your friend in an attempt to gain perspective. Another approach you can take when the facts don't seem to be working in your favor, is to accept what is. Okay? Accept what is. You've heard that saying, it is what it is. Right? That's kind of what this is talking about. The irony of unfortunate events is that it is the rumination and rejection of them that keeps us stuck and paralyzed from them, robbing us of the mental energy that we need to gain new traction and move beyond them toward our goals and recovery. I want to make sure you don't miss that. It's not so much the events in and of themselves that trip us up. It's our propensity to ruminate on those events, right? Which robs us of the mental energy to be present. We cannot go around our regrets. We must move through them with acceptance, right? We can't sidestep our regrets of unfortunate events as if they didn't happen. There's that saying, the only way out is through. When we're talking about pain and forgiveness and regret, this is so true. That's why it's a catchphrase. That's why it's a cliche, because most cliches are cliches for a reason. It's because there's truth to them. So we must move through them with acceptance. How can I accept bad things, you might wonder? Right? We get that all the time. And this is where it gets tricky, because acceptance is not assents, right? And we'll get more into that later. But if you find yourself questioning, like, how can I accept that bad things have happened to me or are happening to me? And it's a matter of understanding that bad things happen. It doesn't mean that we're okay with them happening. It means we acknowledge that bad things happen and that we're not the exception. Okay? We are not saying that we are in alliance or an agreement that what happened is right or that it's moral. What we are saying is that we acknowledge that it occurred and that a multitude of contributing factors, and many, if not all, were outside of our control, which gave birth to it. That is all. The mistake most people make is when they get stuck in regret, is that they feel like they could have done something differently, or somehow the responsibility is all on their shoulders to have done something differently to prevent the negative outcome. There are a lot of moving parts at any given point in time to where we are in life and context and time and space. And yeah, of course we have to own our actions, but we're not the only ones at play. And so it's really important to remember that. It is hard to accept an unpleasant truth. And so we need to find methods to help us find our way past them so we don't stay stuck. One such effective method is using a small but powerful phrase, yes, but, and add it to an extension to our thoughts. You hear this a lot in therapy, and you may, hear your therapist echo this back to you when maybe he or she is catching concrete thinking or black and white thinking or all or nothing thinking or negative filtering. Come back with you. Yes, but you said this. Yes, but didn't you do that? Or yes, but didn't so-and-so say to that you were this, which might be the opposite of what you're expressing. It's to pull us out of that vacuum of negative self-talk, right? Because when we start reflecting on negative events and how our role played out in them, it's easy to feel like it's all-encompassing, right? But life is not linear. It's fluid, okay? And we don't live in a single space and time. And so it's really important to try and get in the habit of using this yes, but language in expressing our thoughts and emotions, especially in response to negative ones. So this helps us from ignoring the unpleasant and accepting things and looking beyond them to what is praiseworthy, right? This is self-compassion, meaningful, and larger than our loss, right? life is larger than our loss, right? Life is not singular. Life is expanding, right? It helps us to add balance to our universe and our global perspective. Let me give you an example of what an unpleasant thought might look like. Quote, "My spouse left me because I did not hold up my end of the marriage. No one will want to be with such a terrible partner." Okay? So here's an example of adding a yes, but kind of statement to that description. Yes, my spouse left me because I did not communicate that I was struggling with depression. But I am working really hard on my recovery now and to be a better communicator, and will be a better partner in my next relationship as well. Do you see the difference? One is rather absolute and general statement of the self or around a loss. When we add the yes but statement, we're focusing not on the loss, but what we have learned from that experience and how we are going to carry that through in a positive implication, right? In future relationships. Okay, this brings us on to the next skill in this category we'll be discussing in terms of identifying our healthy thoughts. So, scheduling a worry time, I know that sounds really weird, right? If you're already an anxious person, you're like, I don't want to worry more, I'm trying to worry less. So, why in the world would I schedule a time to worry more, right? Which is why when I'm talking with clients, I try to move away from that language a little bit, not so much a worry time as much as a problem-solving time or brainstorming time. Maybe use whatever language resonates with you the most, okay? But scheduling a problem-solving or worry time is an important skill to kind of turn anxiety upside down on its head, right? I have a lot of clients who come and say that they, for whatever reason, can't seem to sleep as soon as they lay down. All these worries rush through their mind, and they're not able to rest or sleep well, and it causes insomnia. And the quandary with that is oftentimes, as busy as we are and as much we have competing for our attention in today's society, and especially with social media and the internet and families and work, it's easy for our mind to stay preoccupied, right? And so oftentimes the only break it gets is when the lights go off, the world shuts down, our head hits the pillow, and then our brain attempts to do this kind of defrag. If you remember old computers, you do the defrag to clean it up when it would get a little jumbled, to help it kind of best utilize its memory. Our brains do the same thing, right? When life gets quiet and we start to rest, our brain tries to make sense of everything that was going on during the day, including the things that we're worried about. And so, in light of that, the idea of scheduling a problem-solving time allows us to do this kind of defrag, but not at an inappropriate time, such as when we should be sleeping, but rather when we have time to focus and be intentional about the things that we are concerned with and come at it from a problem-solving mindset as opposed to venting, right? Or hashing or obsessing about our concerns. So, it's really important to understand when we talk about this, it's not that I want you to ignore your problems, right? Avoidance doesn't work. We know this, especially with anxious thoughts, right? We don't want to push them away. We don't want to chase them down. We want to acknowledge them, right? That's what mindfulness is. It's acknowledging without judgment. So I'm not encouraging you to ignore your problems or to be an ostrich and stick your head in the sand. I would rather you be like mindful that they're there, okay? So this looks like instead of spinning our wheels on pending concerns, which isn't productive, and that prevents us from being able to be an active participant in our lives. The prevents us from being able to be present in the here and now, right? And inevitably interferes with our relationships, our performance, our concentration. And we know that anxious thoughts, rumination, and worry impact our sleep, right? And places us at a greater disadvantage the following days, right? If we're not sleeping right, it's going to roll into the next day. It's going to have a ripple effect. When we're sleep deprived, we have less distress tolerance, we're more irritable, more prone to illness, and our critical thinking takes a nosedive. So in short, anxiety limits us in identifying our healthy thoughts. So this is going to be a 2-step process, okay? It's a skill that allows for better management of our anxious thoughts, but it's also a skill that requires a little bit of planning and fortitude. So step 1, keep a worry or problem journal handy. This does not have to be anything fancy, right? And if you've ever been to, I don't know, on Pinterest and you see these like fancy goal 5-year plan journals and all color coordinated with stickers, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, sticky notes would suffice, but nothing fancy, just accessible. We want to remove as much friction as possible from getting our concerns out of our head and onto paper, okay? Or in my case, Google Keep Notes, because if you know me, I have an aversion to paper, but that's a conversation for another day. It can be a note app on your phone, a physical notebook, a lined piece of paper. You want to keep it readily available so that when you have an intrusive thought of worry or concern, you can just jot it down. Now let me just give you a note of caution. When I say just jot it down, I mean just jot it down. Only write down the concern in definitive and concise terms, like a single sentence, okay? Not a paragraph, not run-on sentences, not a laundry list of worries, okay? This is what we're trying to move away from. We're trying to get specific about our concerns, because the more specific they are, the easier it's going to be to problem solve some potential solutions, okay? We're not looking to jot down paragraphs, okay? Like I said, of your associated thoughts here. It's not that kind of journal. The goal here is to get them out of your head and onto paper so you can get about your business without getting derailed. All right? If we just start to get swallowed up by our concerns, it's going to, again, rob us of being present. And the whole idea of keeping a worry journal is so you can set it aside for a later time, right? When you're trying to sleep. It's not the time to problem solve, all right? So that was step 1, okay? So this brings us on to step 2. So once you have your journal, right, by your bedside, on your phone, somewhere accessible so you can just dump, or I should say transfer problems that pop in your head onto paper, is so that you can put it away. So you don't have to look at it, you don't have to think about it. Something magic happens with the brain when our pending concerns aren't just floating around in our headspace somewhere, but when we put them down in a predetermined place with a predetermined intention to come back to it, our brain stops fighting us, right? We stop being pulled away to address this pending concern because it's not really pending anymore. Meaning it's not likely that it's going to be ignored, right? We're going to get to it. As I often say, we're just putting a pin in it, like a thumbtack. We're just tacking it to the wall, right? Imagine your mind is like a cubicle, and you see, I don't know if you've ever worked in a cubicle before, but it has that kind of mesh wall where you can just kind of tack stuff on there that's important, right? Stuff that you want to keep in plain sight so you don't forget about it. You'll come back to it soon. It's just, hey, right now I'm working on this other thing. I can't be pulled away to work on this right now, but as soon as I get a moment, I'll circle back. That's what I'm talking about. We're going to put a pin in this thing. We do that by writing it down, in a journal, a specific, dedicated journal to problem solving. Okay, step 2. Now it's time to schedule a worry or problem solving time. So for some, this might be once a week. For others, it might be daily, right? But the important thing here is to have a predetermined, scheduled time. Put it in your calendar when you plan to sit down and brainstorm ideas to address your concerns. I say brainstorm because as you sit down to explore ideas to resolve your concerns, it is vital that you do so without judgment. Okay? Judgment will block your thoughts, not help them flow. And no idea is good or bad. Just get them out there on paper and you can prioritize them later. Okay? And I should also mention that it's important to cap the time on your worry time. Okay? Meaning, if it's half an hour, stick to half an hour and put the thing away. If it's 2 hours a week, put the thing away after 2 hours. And your time limit is going to be a personal decision, and it doesn't have to be nothing set in stone. You could set aside 30 minutes, once a week. If it feels like that's not sufficient time to really focus on your concerns, then make it an hour. And if that's not enough, make it 2. If it starts to get into the 2 hour, block of time, I would suggest that maybe you break that down to maybe an hour block twice a week instead of 2 hours once a week. But, just so it's not so overwhelming, or that if you have that much going on, that you have more consistency in addressing your concerns so it doesn't end up being an ordeal. Okay? So set a time limit. We do not want you to go into deep down into a rabbit hole so deep that you lose time and needs to be focused on other priorities, right? Because there's other things going on too. So we want to make sure we don't lose sight of our priorities when we're setting aside this dedicated time to problem solve. After jotting down some bullet points on potential solutions, I want you to pick 1 or 2 to follow up on and then put it away. That's right, put it away. So pick 1 or 2 things to focus on, right? Problems that you wrote down. And then after you've brain dumped some possible solutions, then put them in priority in order of feasible solutions, right? In order of likelihood that they might actually make a dent in your goal or your problem, okay? And then pick 1 or 2 to focus on and then put it away. By that I mean if it's a phone call, if there's a point of contact, or if you need to get more information, do some research, then do that. That could be Google, that could be a phone call, that could be something very tangible, right? Do that one thing. It might take 5 minutes, and that might take another hour. I don't know. But focus on that thing and then put it back away. Even if you don't get your answer or get as far along as you would like, because there's going to be a temptation to keep digging, to keep trying, to implementing. But again, we don't want it to become an obsession. So put it away at the end of your time. As simple as that. Because if it's as it should be, a recurring thing on your schedule, it's not like you're going to ignore it. You're going to come back to it, right? Okay. So remember, if you find it difficult to put your worrisome thoughts away after putting your journal away, remember that you already have an appointment pending to return and pick up where you left off. Okay, and now that you've learned to set some healthy boundaries on your anxious thoughts, you will find in time that your anxious thoughts become fuel for productive and proactive behavior, as opposed to a waste of time and precious mental real estate. Okay, so let's go ahead and recap on everything we just discussed this episode. And congratulations if you've managed to get this far in the episode and I still have your attention. That's great. Good job. This stuff is life-changing, so it's a good thing that you're making this investment of your time. I don't take that lightly. And you'll find that if you start practicing these skills, you're going to get quicker and quicker at catching your anxious thoughts, for sure. Okay, so recap. You can use yes, but statements to turn your old, unhealthy thoughts into more productive ones and get in the habit of identifying your healthy thoughts, right? So, yes, but statements. If that's all you get from this episode, that's good, okay? Yes, but statements. All right, the second skill we discussed was learning to repurpose your anxious thoughts into fuel for proactive behavior. And we do this by journaling and planning a routine problem-solving time. All right? So you're taking control. Your anxious thoughts aren't just happening. You're not a victim to them. But you can leverage them to become a problem-solving guru. Okay? That's what we're after. All right, and how do we put this into practice? All right, so this will be your homework. I would like you to continue to track your mood using a quick mood scale, such as the one I offer as a free download if you subscribe to my newsletter at thementalhealthtoolbox.com, or you can use whatever system is already in place if you're in the habit of doing that, or your phone calendar, right? The important thing is that you're tracking your mood, all right? The next thing you want to do is try using yes, but statements that we discussed to pivot away from your stubborn negative thoughts versus avoiding them, right? This is a way to kind of tackle them head on and get out of the habit of sidestepping your thoughts, which doesn't work. So this helps in identifying your healthy thoughts, right? And that's what we want. We want to be able to identify our healthy thoughts, and sometimes that means stretching them out to kind of see what's really going on. And we do that with yes, but statements. And lastly, I want you to start keeping a worry journal, or as I say, a problem-solving journal, in whatever fashion suits your style, and then schedule a time to address them by trying out possible solutions. And so there you have it. Great job. You just finished, if you've been following the previous episodes, we just wrapped up the first pillar of fundamental skills along cognitive behavioral therapy, right? And that is the relationship between our thoughts and our mood. From here, we'll be moving on to behavior, or what's known as behavioral activation. And we'll be discussing 4 skills along those lines. We will be discussing the second pillar of coping skills for depression and anxiety through behavioral activation, as I said. A common struggle with depression is anhedonia, or the loss of interest in activities that one used to enjoy, right? It's a telltale sign of depression. This is often expressed by clients or consumers as a lack of motivation, feeling kind of blah. And in the next several episodes, I will cover the purpose and importance of engaging in activities in spite of feeling the need to isolate and to avoid. This is a vital part of recovery and starting the path to feeling better, like your best self again. Okay? And this will encompass things such as the relationship between our activity and our mood. We'll be discussing how depression interferes with our desire to engage and participate in activities, and we'll be talking about how to identify previous enjoyable activities or things that we used to engage in or find joy in the past. And there you have it, another episode and some tools to help you thrive. I hope you try them out, you implement them. As always, I'm wide open to feedback. If you want to shoot me a question, if you have anything in particular you would like me to cover, feel free to use the contact form. I'll put a link in the episode notes for you to use at your leisure. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any upcoming content. as well as the newsletter if you want to jump over to the website, and you'll get updates on the blog and other information that comes down the pipeline, okay? All right, so there you have it. So glad to have you aboard, Team Thrivers, and I just want to also note that if you are in crisis or if you know anybody else who's in crisis, do not forget there is tons of help out there. There's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. You can also text START, S-T-A-R-T, to 741-741. And you can also contact NAMI, Referral Helpline, if you're looking for mental health services at 1-800-950-6264, and they'll point you in the right direction. Just a disclaimer, I am a licensed therapist, but I'm not your therapist. And if you need a professional, you should get one. And you can do so by calling NAMI or jumping over to psychologytoday.com. Lots of resources there. You can also visit my website, thementalhealthtoolbox.com. Jump over to the resources page, and you'll see a plethora of information there and how to access services for one-to-one assistance, okay? Until the next episode, keep thriving, and Happy New Year. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Mental Health Toolbox Podcast. Learn more at www.thementalhealthtoolbox.com.